I never thought a resignation letter could become a corporate bomb until HR read mine aloud to the entire executive board. As the final words echoed through the conference room, the VP's face turned white as a death sentence had just been delivered. Me? I just sat there, savoring the moment I'd been orchestrating for months. 7 years of building medical device safety protocols. And it took just 2 pages to destroy the man who tried to destroy everything I'd built. My name is Emma Clark. And at 32, I was the youngest quality assurance director in Medivance Technologies history. For 7 years, I'd built our compliance systems from the ground up, ensuring every life-saving device that left our facility met FDA and EU MDR standards. But on that particular Tuesday morning, I wasn't in my usual spot reviewing protocols. Instead, I sat in conference room A, watching HR Director Margaret Phillips adjust her reading glasses as she prepared to read my resignation letter to the entire executive board. The room was packed. CEO Richard Steinberg sat at the head of the table, his fingers drumming nervously. The chief legal officer had her laptop open, fingers poised over the keyboard. Internal audit was present, notepads ready. And there, 3 seats to my left, sat Victor Hale, our newly appointed VP of Operations, the man who'd publicly humiliated me just 3 months ago. Victor looked irritated, checking his phone repeatedly. He probably thought this was another waste of his valuable time, another bureaucratic circus, as he liked to call our safety meetings. He had no idea that the next 10 minutes would cost him everything he'd worked for. Margaret cleared her throat. As per company protocol, when a department head submits a resignation that cites workplace concerns, it must be read before the executive board. She lifted the 2 pages I'd carefully crafted over the weekend. This is from Emma Clark, Director of Quality Assurance. Victor rolled his eyes and muttered something about drama queens to the CFO beside him. I kept my expression neutral. My hands folded calmly on the table. Inside, my pulse quickened with anticipation. To the Executive Board of Medivance Technologies, Margaret began, her voice steady and clear. I hereby submit my resignation, effective immediately. After 7 years of dedicated service, I can no longer in good conscience continue in my role while systematic violations of FDA regulations and EU medical device directives occur under current operational leadership. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Richard's drumming stopped. The legal officer's typing ceased. Victor's smirk began to fade. Margaret continued reading, her voice growing more strained with each sentence. On March 15th, production lot INS 2847, insulin pumps designated for pediatric ICU units, were approved for shipment despite failing 3 critical pressure threshold tests. The approval came directly from VP Operations, overriding established QA protocols. Evidence archived under file reference QA03-15-2024-A. Victor's face had gone from annoyed to pale. His hand reached for his phone, then stopped, as if remembering everyone was watching. On March 28th, ventilator units bound for Dallas Memorial's intensive care unit, Lot Vent 9823, bypassed electromagnetic interference testing. When I raised concerns via email, I was told, and I quote, "Your Stone Age processes are killing our quarterly numbers. The algorithm says they're fine." Evidence archived under QA03-28-2024-B. The CEO's face was turning red. Not at me. His eyes were locked on Victor with an intensity that could melt steel. On April 10th, Margaret's voice wavered slightly. Cardiac defibrillators designated for European distribution, Lot Defib 4421, were marked as CE certified despite certification expiring 6 weeks prior. Biocompatibility testing documents were backdated to appear compliant. This constitutes fraud under EU Directive 2017-745. Evidence archived under QA04-10-2024-C. The legal officer was now typing furiously. Victor started to speak. "This is ridiculous. She's just—" "Let her finish," Richard commanded, his voice dangerously quiet. Margaret looked up briefly, making eye contact with me before continuing. "I have documented 47 instances of safety protocol violations in the past 90 days. all traceable to the implementation of the MedCloud 2.0 system and the systematic dismantling of established quality controls. Each instance has been meticulously documented, with emails, system logs, and override confirmations preserved. The room was silent except for the sound of Margaret turning to the second page. Victor's phone buzzed. He didn't dare look at it. 7 years ago, I joined Medivance Technologies as a junior quality engineer, fresh from my master's program at Johns Hopkins. The company was different then, smaller, scrappier, but fiercely committed to one principle. No device left our facility unless it could save lives without taking them. I'd worked 16-hour days building our quality systems from scratch, creating processes that got us through FDA audits with flying colors and earned us preferred vendor status with major hospital networks across the country. By year 5, I'd been promoted to Director of Quality Assurance, the youngest in company history. My team of 12 specialists had achieved something remarkable: 3 consecutive years without a single device recall. Unheard of in our industry. We'd developed a paper trail system that was bulletproof, combining digital tracking with physical documentation that satisfied even the most stringent EU MDR requirements. Yes, it generated a lot of paperwork, but it also saved lives. Then Victor Hale arrived. He came to us from a Silicon Valley startup that had burned through $50 million in venture capital before folding. Somehow, he'd convinced our board that his revolutionary approach to operational efficiency was exactly what Medivance needed to compete in the modern market. Within 2 weeks of his arrival, he'd scheduled what he called a strategic alignment session, mandatory attendance for all department heads. I remember walking into that meeting carrying my quarterly compliance report, 103 pages of meticulously documented safety protocols, test results, and regulatory updates. I'd spent 2 weeks preparing it, knowing that new leadership often wanted comprehensive overviews. I should have recognized the setup when I saw Victor's presentation already queued up. Digitizing the dinosaurs: how legacy thinking kills innovation. Before we begin, Victor announced, standing at the head of the conference table with the confidence of someone who'd never had a patient die from his decisions. I want to address the elephant in the room. Or, should I say, the tree cemetery. He pointed directly at my report. Emma, would you mind holding that up? I lifted the bound document, unsure where this was heading. Ladies and gentlemen, this is exactly what's wrong with Medivance Technologies. He strode over, took the report from my hands, and, I'll never forget this moment, walked straight to the waste bin. We live in an age of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and predictive analytics. Yet we're still killing forests to satisfy regulators who haven't updated their thinking since the 1990s. The report made a distinctive thud as it hit the bottom of the empty bin. 23 other department heads sat in stunned silence. Someone, I think it was the head of manufacturing, actually gasped. That report, I said, keeping my voice level despite the heat rising in my chest, contains FDA-mandated documentation for a world that no longer exists. Victor interrupted, his smile sharp as surgical steel. I've developed something that will revolutionize how we handle compliance. MedCloud 2.0, a fully integrated, AI-driven quality management system that will replace your quaint paper-pushing operation. Quaint. 7 years of building bulletproof safety systems, and he called it quaint. The younger managers, mostly recent hires from tech companies, nodded enthusiastically. They saw sleek dashboards and real-time analytics. The veterans, those who'd been through FDA investigations and product liability lawsuits, exchanged worried glances. But nobody spoke up. Nobody challenged him. Your department generates the highest operational costs with the lowest visible ROI. Victor continued, pulling up a slide that somehow made safety. Compliance look like waste. Effective immediately. We're transitioning to MedCloud 2.0. Emma, I'll need you to upload all existing protocols by end of week. We'll let the algorithm handle the rest. That night, I went home and created a new folder on my personal cloud drive. I named it simply Records. I had no idea then that this folder would become his downfall. But something in my gut, maybe the same instinct that had caught countless near misses over the years, told me to start documenting everything. The first file I uploaded was a photo from my phone, my 100-page report sitting in the trash bin, the title page clearly visible. The timestamp showed 2:47 p.m., March 12, 2024. The beginning of the end for Victor Hale. Though neither of us knew it yet, MedCloud 2.0 launched on a Monday. By Tuesday, I knew we were heading for disaster. The interface was beautiful. I'll give Victor that: sleek blue gradients, real-time analytics dashboards, automated workflow notifications. It looked like something from a tech conference keynote. The younger quality engineers were mesmerized by the drag-and-drop functionality and the promise of paperless compliance. But as I dug into the back end, my stomach turned to ice. The system was missing fundamental fields. Lot traceability, the ability to track every component back to its source, had been reduced to a simple text box with no validation. Expiration date monitoring, critical for biological components, was listed as Phase 2 implementation. Most terrifying of all, the critical failure alert system had been replaced with what Victor called predictive risk scoring, essentially an algorithm that guessed whether something might fail based on historical data from completely different products. "This is revolutionary," Victor announced during the rollout meeting, gesturing at a screen showing green check marks across all departments. "The AI has already identified 17 redundant processes we can eliminate immediately." I raised my hand. "Those aren't redundant processes. Those are FDA-mandated verification steps for Class 3 medical devices." "The FDA is playing catch-up with technology," Victor replied, his tone suggesting I was a child who didn't understand how the adult world worked. "By the time they audit us next year, everyone will be using systems like this. We're not breaking rules, we're setting new standards." After the meeting, I found Tom Rodriguez, our senior manufacturing engineer with 23 years at Medivance, standing by the coffee machine, looking like he'd seen a ghost. "Emma, the system just approved a batch release without sterility test results," he whispered. "The field where we'd normally input the bacterial endotoxin levels, it doesn't exist. The system just assumed it was fine." That afternoon, I documented everything: screenshots of the missing fields, the system architecture showing absent critical checkpoints, email threads where Victor's hand-picked innovation team, kids fresh from coding boot camps, dismissed FDA requirements as legacy bureaucracy. But the real problems started in week 2. Jenny Wu from incoming inspection came to my office, laptop in hand. "Emma, you need to see this." She showed me a receiving report for cardiac stent components. MedCloud auto-approved these based on the supplier's certificate. But when I tried to enter the dimensional inspection results, there's nowhere to put them. The system says physical inspection is redundant when supplier data is available. "Run the physical inspection anyway," I told her. "Document everything offline." Victor's already sent an email saying anyone caught using offline documentation will be written up for resistance to digital transformation. That night, I worked until 3 a.m. creating a shadow system, a hidden Excel framework that could capture what MedCloud couldn't. I encrypted it, stored it on my personal drive, and shared it only with the senior engineers I trusted. We called it the backup, and we filled it religiously, knowing that someday, someone would need to know what really happened. The young managers, meanwhile, were in love. MedCloud's dashboard showed 95% efficiency improvements. Batch approval times dropped from days to hours. The system's AI generated compliance reports that looked impressive, pages of graphs and metrics that meant nothing but photographed well for board presentations. "Look at this." Bradley, one of Victor's protégés, showed me his screen during a department meeting. "We've increased throughput by 340% since implementation. QA approval time is down to 6 minutes average. That's because the system is auto-approving without human review." I pointed out, "Exactly, that's the beauty of it. The algorithm learns from patterns. It knows what should pass." "It's guessing," I corrected. "And when it guesses wrong, people die." Bradley laughed, actually laughed. You sound like my grandmother talking about self-driving cars. Technology isn't the enemy. Emma? Neither is gravity, I replied. But I still wouldn't jump off a building trusting an app to catch me. Victor must have heard about my resistance because the next day, I received a new reporting structure announcement. I would now report to Bradley, despite having 12 years more experience and, technically, outranking him by 2 levels. The email cited organizational streamlining and fresh perspectives on traditional roles. I screenshot that email too. Added it to my growing folder. By then, records contained over 200 files. But I knew I needed more than just evidence of incompetence. I needed proof of real danger, the kind that even Victor's board supporters couldn't ignore. I didn't have to wait long. The insulin pump incident happened on a Thursday. I was reviewing batch records when Tom Rodriguez burst into my office, face flushed, hands shaking. Emma, we have a problem. Lot INS 2847, the pediatric insulin pumps for Children's Hospital, Boston. I pulled up the batch on MedCloud. Status, approved for shipment, green check marks all the way down. But Tom was holding a stack of printed test results, the kind we weren't supposed to have anymore. 3 pressure threshold failures, he said, spreading the papers on my desk. The pumps are delivering insulin at inconsistent rates when back pressure increases. In a pediatric patient, that could mean severe hypoglycemia or diabetic ketoacidosis. I checked MedCloud's test results. The system showed predicted performance 98.7% optimal. How did it pass? I asked, though I already knew. The algorithm. It averaged the successful tests and ignored the failures as statistical outliers. Victor personally overrode my hold request an hour ago. Tom showed me his phone, a text from Victor. Ship it. The algorithm says it's fine. Stop your paranoid delays. I immediately sent an email to Victor, CCing Legal and Richard Steinberg. Lot INS 2847 shows critical pressure failures. Recommend immediate shipment, hold pending investigation. Victor's response came in under a minute. Disregard. Emma is referencing outdated manual testing. MedCloud's predictive analysis supersedes. Lot approved for shipment. I took screenshots. I saved the emails. I photographed Tom's test results. Then I did something I'd never done in 7 years. I called the FDA's MedWatch hotline from my personal phone and filed an anonymous safety concern. The lot was stopped at the loading dock. 2 weeks later, the ventilators happened. Dallas Memorial had ordered 40 units for their new ICU wing. Our best customer, our biggest contract of the quarter. The units needed electromagnetic interference testing, critical to ensure they wouldn't malfunction near other medical equipment. MedCloud didn't even have a field for EMI testing. It literally couldn't track whether it had been done. I found out because Sarah Martinez from Final Testing left a sticky note on my monitor. Check your personal email. From her Gmail account to mine. EMI testing skipped on vent 9823. Victor says the algorithm's environmental modeling makes physical testing redundant. These are going to an ICU with MRI machines 1 floor down. This is insane. I confronted Victor in his office. Big mistake. Bradley was there, along with 3 other members of the innovation team. The ventilators need EMI testing, I stated flatly. It's not optional. It's FDA mandated for Class 2 devices. Victor leaned back in his ergonomic chair, the one that cost more than most people's monthly salary. Emma, when will you understand that we're not just checking boxes anymore? Our predictive models show 99.2% probability of zero interference. Based on what data? Historical performance metrics from similar devices. Similar isn't the same, and those metrics are from controlled environments, not a hospital with 30 different types of equipment generating electromagnetic fields. Bradley chimed in, eager to impress his mentor. Emma, your resistance to progress is becoming a liability. Maybe it's time to consider whether you're the right fit for Medivance's future. Maybe it's time to consider whether killing patients fits Medivance's future, I shot back. The room went silent. Victor's face darkened. Document that statement, he told Bradley. Insubordination and inflammatory language. HR will want this for her file. But I was already recording on my phone in my pocket, legal in our one-party consent state. Another file for records. The defibrillators were the final straw. $15 million worth of life-saving equipment bound for 6 EU countries. I discovered the expired CE certification during a routine audit that wasn't supposed to exist anymore, but worse. When I dug deeper, I found that someone had altered the biocompatibility testing dates in MedCloud. The tests appeared to have been completed on March 1st, but the biological materials hadn't even arrived at our facility until March 15th. This wasn't just negligence anymore. This was fraud. I documented everything, every falsified date, every impossible timeline. Every email where Victor or his team pressured technicians to adjust the data. I found out later that Bradley had actually taught a junior engineer how to backdate entries in MedCloud, calling it temporal optimization. By early April, my records folder had grown to 1.3 gigabytes. Emails, screenshots, photos, test results. Even security camera footage I'd convinced a friendly IT tech to preserve showing boxes being loaded without inspection stamps. 47 documented violations in 90 days. Each one representing not just a broken regulation, but potential lives at risk. The pediatric insulin pumps alone could have affected 300 children. The ventilators were destined for critical COVID recovery units. The defibrillators? Those were headed to rural hospitals that couldn't afford recalls or replacements. I knew I had enough. The question was, how to deploy it for maximum impact. That's when I decided to turn my resignation into a weapon. I spent the entire weekend crafting my resignation letter. Not in anger. Anger makes you sloppy. I wrote it like I was preparing evidence for a federal investigation, because essentially, I was. Every word was chosen deliberately. Every accusation backed by a specific file reference. Every violation tied to a regulation number. I wasn't writing a goodbye letter. I was building a legal bomb with a timer set to detonate in the Monday morning executive meeting. The first draft was 12 pages. Too long, it would lose impact. The second was 6 pages, still too much room for Victor to interrupt and spin. The final version was exactly 2 pages, calibrated to be read aloud in under 10 minutes but devastating enough to end careers. I started with the kill shot. I hereby submit my resignation, effective immediately. After 7 years of dedicated service, I can no longer in good conscience continue in my role while systematic violations of FDA regulations and EU medical device directives occur under current operational leadership. No emotion. No accusations of personal misconduct. Just cold, hard regulatory facts that would make legal's blood run cold. Each violation was structured identically: date, lot number, specific failure, regulatory code violated, evidence file reference. I included the 3 worst incidents: the insulin pumps, ventilators, and defibrillators, with enough detail to trigger immediate investigation, but not enough for Victor to prepare a defense. Production lot INS 2847, insulin pumps designated for pediatric ICU units, were approved for shipment despite failing 3 critical pressure threshold tests, violating 21 CFR 820-80. The approval came directly from VP Operations, overriding established QA protocols. Evidence archived under file reference QA03-15-2024-A. I knew Victor would assume these were empty threats, that I was bluffing about the evidence. He'd grown comfortable with yes men and fresh graduates who wouldn't dare challenge him. He'd forgotten that I'd spent 7 years building relationships with every inspector, auditor, and compliance officer on the East Coast. The masterstroke was the CC list. CEO Richard Steinberg, obvious. Chief Legal Officer Patricia Wong, essential. Head of Internal Audit Marcus Thompson, critical. But I also included Board Chairman James Mueller's executive assistant with instructions to forward time-sensitive compliance matter. Then came the BCC that would save everything: my personal Gmail, my attorney, and, though Victor would never know this, a contact at the FDA's Office of Criminal Investigations who told me years ago, "If you ever see something that crosses from negligence to fraud, you call me." But I needed one more thing: witnesses. Sunday night. I called 5 senior engineers I trusted. Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m., executive conference room. A. Don't be late. Don't sit near Victor. And whatever happens, don't react. Just watch. Emma. What are you planning? Tom asked. Justice, I replied. Or at least, accountability. I submitted the resignation at 11:47 p.m. Sunday night, scheduling it to arrive in inboxes at 6 a.m. Monday. By the time Victor was pouring his second cup of overpriced executive lounge coffee, Margaret from HR would already be printing copies, her hands trembling as she realized what she was about to read to the board. I arrived at the office at 7:30 a.m. Monday, earlier than usual. I packed my personal items slowly, methodically. 7 years of memories went into a single banker's box. The photo from our first FDA approval, the team celebration from our zero-defect year, the handwritten thank you note from a surgeon whose patient survived because our quality control caught a defect that could have been fatal. At 9:45 a.m., I received a text from Margaret. Executive Conference Room A. 10 a.m., mandatory attendance. I walked in at 9:58 a.m., choosing a seat where I could see everyone's face. The senior engineers were already there, scattered strategically around the table. Richard Steinberg looked exhausted. He'd probably been on calls since 6:01 a.m. Patricia Wong had her laptop open, fingers flying across the keyboard. Marcus Thompson was reading a printed copy of my letter, his face growing paler with each line. Victor strutted in at 10:03 a.m., irritated. What's this about? I have a supplier call at 10:30. Sit down, Victor, Richard said quietly. The CEO's tone made everyone freeze. Margaret stood at the head of the table, my letter in her hands. She looked at me once, a mixture of respect and fear in her eyes, then began to read. As per company protocol, when a department head submits a resignation that cites workplace concerns, it must be read before the executive board. Victor rolled his eyes. This is about Emma. Let her go. We'll promote Bradley. The letter cites specific regulatory violations. Patricia Wong interjected, her legal training kicking in. Protocol requires full board review. Margaret cleared her throat and began reading. To the Executive Board of Medevance Technologies, I hereby submit my resignation, effective immediately. The room temperature changed with each word. I kept my eyes on Victor, watching his transformation from annoyance to concern to dawning horror as he realized this wasn't just a resignation. It was an execution. Margaret's voice grew steadier as she read, as if the gravity of each word gave her strength. The conference room had become a courtroom, and she was delivering the prosecution's case. On March 15th, production lot INS 2847, insulin pumps designated for pediatric ICU units, were approved for shipment despite failing 3 critical pressure threshold tests. Violating 21 CFR 820-80, the approval came directly from VP Operations, overriding established QA protocols. Evidence archived under file reference QA03-15-2024-A. Richard Steinberg's knuckles were white as he gripped his coffee mug. Patricia Wong was no longer typing. She was staring at Victor with the intensity of a prosecutor who'd just found her smoking gun. This is ridiculous, Victor interrupted, his voice cracking slightly. Those tests were outliers. The algorithm. Let her finish, Richard commanded, his CEO voice cutting through the room like ice. Margaret continued, each violation landing like a physical blow. On March 28th, ventilator units bound for Dallas Memorial's intensive care unit, Lot Vent 9823, bypassed electromagnetic interference testing mandated under IEC 6.0601-1-2. When concerns were raised via email, the response from VP Operations stated, quote, "Your Stone Age processes are killing our quarterly numbers. The algorithm says they're fine." Evidence archived under QA03-28-2024-B. I watched Victor's hand move toward his phone, then pull back. He was calculating, trying to figure out how to spin this. But there was no spin for what came next. On April 10th, Margaret's voice had dropped to almost a whisper, but everyone heard every word. Cardiac defibrillators designated for European distribution, Lot Defib 4421, were marked as CE certified despite certification expiring 6 weeks prior. Biocompatibility testing documents were backdated to appear compliant, showing tests completed on March 1st when materials arrived March 15th. This constitutes fraud under EU Directive 2017/745 and violation of 18 U.S. 8cc. PRF 1. Evidence archived under QA 04-10 2024 C. The word fraud changed everything. This wasn't just about FDA violations anymore. This was criminal territory. Marcus Thompson from Internal Audit stood up. I need to see this evidence immediately. It's all documented, I said, speaking for the first time. My voice was calm, professional. 47 separate incidents over 90 days, screenshots, emails, system logs, security footage. Everything is preserved with chain of custody documentation. You're lying, Victor said, but his face had gone gray. This is retaliation because I modernized your department. Then you won't mind if we verify, Patricia Wong asked, her laptop already open. Margaret, continue reading. Margaret reached the final paragraph, the one I'd crafted specifically for this moment. I have provided complete documentation to internal audit and have preserved all evidence in accordance with federal whistleblower protections under 21 U.S. C. Paragraphs 339D. 1. I am prepared to cooperate fully with any investigation by the FDA, EU regulatory bodies, or other relevant authorities. My sole concern is patient safety and the integrity of medical devices bearing Medivance Technologies' name. I cannot continue to work for an organization where profit-driven algorithms override human safety protocols. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Richard Steinberg's phone rang. He looked at the screen and his face went white. It's the FDA, he said. They've received a complaint. They're initiating an immediate investigation of Lot Defib 4421. He looked at Victor with pure fury. The entire European shipment, $15 million. Patricia Wong was already on her feet. I need all shipping stopped immediately. Nothing leaves this facility until we've reviewed everything. This is insane. Victor stood, his chair rolling back. You're going to tank our quarterly numbers because of some disgruntled... Stop! Richard's voice boomed. Marcus, I want a full audit report by end of day. Patricia, contact outside counsel immediately. Victor, you're suspended pending investigation, effective immediately. You can't. Security will escort you out. Richard continued. Your system access is revoked. Do not contact any employees. Do not touch any files. The 5 senior engineers I'd asked to attend were witnesses to Victor's complete destruction. Tom Rodriguez couldn't hide a small smile. Sarah Martinez was typing rapidly on her phone, probably telling the testing floor that the nightmare was over, but the meeting wasn't done. Board Chairman James Muller's voice came through the conference phone. Apparently, he'd been listening the entire time. Ms. Clark, are you still in the room? Yes, sir. Do you have copies of all documentation? Multiple secured copies, sir, with date verification and digital signatures. Good, Richard. I want her retained as a consultant through the investigation. Full cooperation, double her current rate. I shook my head. Thank you. But no. My resignation stands. I've done what needed to be done. Victor was being escorted out by security, Bradley trailing behind him like a lost puppy. As he passed my chair, he stopped. You destroyed everything I built, he hissed. No, I replied quietly. You destroyed everything I built. I just documented it. The investigation moved faster than anyone expected. Within 2 hours of the meeting, Marcus Thompson's audit team had commandeered Conference Room B, transforming it into a war room. Laptops, printers, and boxes of hastily printed records covered every surface. I watched from the hallway as they worked, their faces growing more horrified with each discovery. At 1:47 p.m., Marcus found me in my office, still packing. His usually composed demeanor was completely shattered. Emma, This is worse than your letter indicated. We found 63 violations, not 47. The MedCloud system has been auto-approving shipments for 5 weeks without any human oversight. There's $12 million of non-compliant product already in hospitals. I wasn't surprised. Check the ghost approvals after midnight. The system was programmed to push through anything pending after 12 a.m. to improve morning metrics. His face went white. How did you know? Because I've been documenting everything. File reference QA0402-2024G. Bradley sent an email bragging about it to the innovation team. Patricia Wong appeared in my doorway, phone pressed to her ear. Emma, outside counsel needs to speak with you, now. She handed me the phone. The voice on the other end was all business. Ms. Clark, I'm David Harrison from Fuller & Associates. We're going to need your complete documentation immediately. The FDA has escalated this to criminal investigation. The EU is threatening to suspend our CE marking across all product lines. Everything is on a secured drive, I told him. 1.3 gigabytes. Organized by date, violation type, and regulatory code. Chain of custody documented. I can transfer it within the hour. Do it. And Ms. Clark? You may have just saved this company from criminal prosecution by documenting everything. Your evidence shows the fraud was isolated to specific individuals, not systemic corporate policy. By 3 p.m., the Dallas Memorial ventilators had been recalled. The CEO himself called to apologize, promising to hold the shipment for testing. The pediatric insulin pumps were already being returned from Boston Children's Hospital. But the European defibrillators were the real problem. They'd been distributed to 6 countries, and tracking them down would take weeks. Richard Steinberg called an emergency all-hands meeting at 4 p.m. The entire facility gathered in the main production floor. Victor's absence was glaring, his reserved parking spot already empty, his office sealed with security tape. I'll be direct, Richard began, his voice echoing through the space. We've discovered systematic falsification of safety records over the past 90 days. This was not a Medivance failure. This was the action of specific individuals who prioritized metrics over lives. Thanks to the diligence of our quality assurance team, specifically Emma Clark, we've caught this before any patients were harmed. The floor erupted in whispers. I saw Bradley trying to slip out the back door, only to be stopped by security. Effective immediately, Richard continued. All MedCloud 2.0 operations are suspended. We're reverting to our previous quality systems. All products shipped in the last 90 days will be reviewed. Any employee who knowingly participated in falsifying records will be terminated and reported to authorities. Tom Rodriguez found me after the meeting. Emma, you did it. You saved lives. I just documented the truth, I replied. Victor hung himself with his own arrogance. By 5:30 p.m., the FBI had arrived. 2 agents in dark suits began interviewing employees, starting with Bradley and the innovation team. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I could see Bradley crying, pointing at documents, probably trying to pin everything on Victor. Marcus Thompson delivered his preliminary report to the board at 6 p.m. I wasn't in the room, but Margaret from HR told me later what happened. 47 confirmed violations in Emma's documentation. 16 additional violations discovered during today's audit. Estimated recall costs, $32 million. Potential FDA fines, up to $50 million. EU penalties could double that. But here's the worst part. Victor received a $2 million signing bonus tied to quarterly performance metrics. He was 3 days away from earning another $1 million in performance bonuses based on the falsified efficiency numbers. James Mueller's response was reportedly volcanic. He risked hundreds of lives for a bonus. The algorithm wasn't designed to ensure safety. Marcus explained. It was designed to maximize throughput and minimize documentation. Every safety check it skipped improved his metrics. At 7 p.m., as I carried my box of belongings to my car, Patricia Wong caught up with me in the parking lot. Emma, the board wants to offer you Victor's position, and a 50% salary increase, and a written guarantee of complete autonomy over quality decisions. I set the box in my trunk and turned to face her. Patricia, I spent 7 years building something I believed in. Victor destroyed it in 90 days. The board let him. They chose metrics over safety, right up until it threatened the company's survival. That won't happen again. No, I agreed. It won't. Because I won't be here to watch it. The next morning, Tuesday, April 16th, the headlines were brutal. Medical device giant under federal investigation. FDA launches criminal probe into Medavance Technologies. Falsified safety records trigger massive medical device recall. But I wasn't reading them from home. I was back in conference room A, this time as a witness, not an employee. The board had called an emergency session. Victor, escorted by his attorney, sat at the far end of the table. He'd aged years overnight, his designer suit replaced with a wrinkled polo. His usual arrogance evaporated. Bradley was nowhere to be seen. He'd already flipped, providing investigators with everything to save himself from criminal charges. Richard Steinberg addressed Victor directly. The board has completed its emergency review, based on the evidence provided by Ms. Clark and confirmed by internal audit. You are terminated for cause, effective immediately. All bonuses, including your signing bonus, are forfeit under the clawback provisions of your contract. Victor's attorney started to protest, but Patricia Wong cut him off. Your client falsified federal documents. He's looking at potential criminal charges under 18 U.S.C. Parva 1001. I suggest you focus on keeping him out of prison rather than fighting for money he obtained through fraud. Furthermore, James Muller's voice came through the speaker, cold as Arctic wind. You are personally liable for any damages resulting from your actions. Medavance will pursue full recovery of all costs associated with this recall. Victor finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. The algorithm was supposed to work. The efficiency gains killed your career, I said, speaking for the first time. Everyone turned to look at me. You had everything, Victor. A $200 million company that trusted you. Talented engineers ready to follow your lead. A chance to actually save lives. And you threw it all away for a $3 million bonus. You destroyed me, he said, his eyes meeting mine. No. I documented you destroying yourself. Every shortcut you took. Every safety protocol you ignored. Every time you chose metrics over human lives, I simply wrote it down. The truth destroyed you. Victor. I just made sure everyone could see it. Richard stood. Victor, security will escort you out. Your personal items will be mailed to you. Any attempt to contact Medavance employees or customers will be considered witness tampering. As security led Victor away, he stopped at the door and turned back. That bonus would have set my family up for life. Tom Rodriguez, who'd been silent until now, stood up. The devices you approved could have ended hundreds of lives. Pediatric insulin pumps. Victor, they were going to children. Victor had no response. He shuffled out, a broken man facing potential federal charges, financial ruin, and the complete destruction of his reputation. The boy genius from Silicon Valley had become a cautionary tale about what happens when you put profit over people. The epilogue came 6 months later. I was working as an independent consultant, helping smaller medical device companies build bulletproof quality systems. The pay was better, the hours were mine to choose. And I slept soundly, knowing no one could override my safety decisions for a quarterly earnings call. The news alert popped up on my phone during lunch. Former Medavance VP pleads guilty to federal charges, receives 18 months in prison. Victor had pled down from multiple counts of fraud to a single count of making false statements to federal investigators. He'd also been permanently barred from working in the medical device industry. Medavance survived, barely. The recalls cost them $43 million. The FDA fines added another $30 million. But they'd avoided criminal prosecution as a company, thanks to what investigators called exceptional documentation of isolated criminal behavior by a rogue executive. My documentation had drawn a clear line between Victor's actions and company policy, saving hundreds of jobs. Richard Steinberg sent me a handwritten note. Emma, you saved more than our company. The Dallas ventilators had a critical EMI vulnerability that would have failed in proximity to MRI machines. The Boston insulin pumps showed a 60% failure rate in extended testing. The EU defibrillators. We're still finding problems. Your courage saved lives. We've renamed our quality award the Emma Clark Excellence Standard. First recipient, Tom Rodriguez. I framed that letter, not for the recognition, but for the reminder. Sometimes, the most powerful weapon against corporate corruption isn't a lawsuit or a federal investigation. Sometimes, it's just one person with the courage to document the truth and the wisdom to know when and how to deploy it. Victor lost his bonus, his freedom, and his future. I lost a job I'd loved. But those children in Boston got insulin pumps that actually worked. Those ICU patients in Dallas got ventilators that wouldn't fail when they needed them most. And 30 European hospitals got safe defibrillators instead of time bombs. That's the real bonus. The only one that matters. Thank you for listening to this story of corporate justice and the power of documentation. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Have you ever witnessed something similar in your workplace? Let me know in the comments.